Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Today we're going to talk about a number of headlines, both directly and indirectly related to Bible prophecy. So let's dive right in. This first one is from oilprice.com and it's titled The Israel-Lebanon Agreement Could Be a Game Changer for Natural Gas Markets. Now I think this is really important because Ezekiel 38:39, the Gog of Magog invasion, it says that the motivation of Gog is to take plunder. And I wonder, this article, is it giving us any insight into what that plunder may be? And we'll comment on that more in a minute. It says Israel and Lebanon announced earlier this month that they had come to an agreement over their maritime border, a historic step in diplomacy that should help boost the natural gas output of both countries. As the world battles gas shortages going into the winter months, this deal provides a ray of hope for global energy markets in the future. The most recent negotiations led by the U.S. have been taking place over several months with the impetus for a deal beginning in 2020. The final agreement is expected to, quote, strengthen Israel's security, inject billions into Israel's economy, and ensure the stability of our northern border, according to Israeli Prime Minister Lapid. Meanwhile, Lebanon's president, Michael Aoun, stated that the deal satisfies Lebanon, meets its demands, and preserves its rights to natural resources. Israel will now be able to produce natural gas from the Karish Maritime Reservoir, which along with the Tannin Field is believed to hold 2 to 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 44 million barrels of liquids. This is a shift as Lebanon previously held claim to part of the Karish field. European and North American powers are eager for Israeli production to begin in the field to alleviate the pressures of the global gas shortages. So think about this. This is 2 to 3 trillion cubic feet. To put that in perspective, this puts Israel in the top 10 among natural gas known reserves of countries in the world. Still, that's about a tenth of the known reserves of Russia, a tenth of the known reserves of Iran, which is the number 2 producer. So Russia and Iran are number 1 and number 2. But again, let's think about that for a moment. In Ezekiel 38:39, there is described an invasion that takes place from Israel's north, which we're told in this article. The Prime Minister points out this will strengthen the security of our northern border. We know from Ezekiel 38:39 that it's described that Israel is a land of unwalled villages. Well, they are not aware. They are not planning to be invaded. They feel that they are dwelling in peace and security when this invasion comes. And we see the Prime Minister here talking about the idea that this strengthens Israel's borders, particularly its northern border, which we know is not going to be the case in Ezekiel 38:39. We also know that from Ezekiel 38:39 that the motivation for this invasion is going to be to take plunder. So could this be the plunder that is the reason for this invasion? Because we know that 2 of the members of that alliance, 2 of the most prominent, are Russia and Iran. And we know, we've talked about in the past, that Russia and Iran are trying to build an OPEC for natural gas, where they would be able to control the price, have control essentially over the world price of natural gas. They're trying to bring Qatar into their fold so that they can dominate not only pipeline delivered natural gas, but liquefied natural gas as well. Israel becoming a top 10 player and providing that gas, not as part of that OPEC of natural gas, could be enough to change prices on the world market. It's not enough to meet the whole world's supply by any means, but prices are set at the margin when it comes to these abilities to get supply of these commodities out in the open. So this could very well be the impetus that leads to the Gog of Magog invasion. So we've talked about some of this before, but we really need to keep our eyes on this because this is becoming a real story. We're seeing this develop. And so as we move forward, if Israel becomes a major supplier of natural gas to Europe and alleviates a lot of their dependence on Russia, as well as helps be a player to stopping Russia and Iran and their intention to build an OPEC of natural gas, we could very well see how this motivation would play out and how these countries would invade Israel to take plunder, to take these fields. These fields are also near Turkey, which is a key player in the Gog of Magog alliance. So is this the reason to take plunder? We don't know, but we'll keep an eye on it. In our next article, this is from Zero Hedge. Forgive me, my voice is still going, guys, but I'm doing my best to power through. It says West urges Russia to reverse grain deal suspension, stop weaponizing food. It says no grain shipping traffic is planned through the Black Sea Safety Corridor for Sunday, the Istanbul Joint Center coordinating the UN deal's logistics said, after it collapsed Saturday. Russia suspended its participation in the Ukraine grain export deal on Saturday after a swarm of drones targeted at least one Russian warship from the Black Sea Navy. Sunday marks the first day in months that export ships from the Ukrainian ports are not traversing the corridor since the deal was enacted in July. Western countries are now urging the deal's restoration and for Russia to re-engage in its obligations under the arrangement. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said on Sunday, Russia's decision to suspend participation in the Black Sea deal puts at risk the main export route of much-needed grain and fertilizers to address the global food crisis caused by its war against Ukraine. Now, we talked about this crisis just last week and how it is proceeding just as we talked about for much of the year. Things are not getting better. We're starting to see shortages crop up in various countries. We're seeing natural disasters make the situation worse. We had flooding in Pakistan, flooding in Nigeria that have wiped out a large amount of crops in both of those countries. We're seeing these fertilizer issues. We're seeing drought in the US, Europe, China that's causing a lot of issues. This just makes the situation even worse because now Russia is saying they're going to blockade Black Sea ports and none of the Ukrainian grains are going to get out. I would argue that they ultimately will get out, but they will get out to those countries that are deemed cooperative with Russia. So there will be strings attached, and yet Russia will use this to wield power and influence over other countries. But this is not going to be good. But I want to come back to the statement. He says to address the global food crisis caused by its war against Ukraine. This global food crisis, we were already talking about this in the newsletter at the beginning of the year. This began really long before the war in Ukraine. It began with this inflationary spiral. We're seeing a lot of the lockdown supply chain issues that were caused, the way essentially the fossil fuel industry around the world was shut down in 2020, and then demand came back, and you can't just flip a light switch and bring all that production back online. So we already saw energy prices beginning to spike in 2021 in Europe, long before Russia invaded Ukraine. And that caused some capacity of fertilizer production in Europe to be curtailed, which led to higher fertilizer prices. So we're talking about all of this long before the war in Ukraine. So they're trying to divert attention away from that because of the poor energy policies that they put in place in the European Union. But ultimately, this is the biggest factor in this food crisis isn't the war in Ukraine, it's the lack of fertilizer production and the high and rising price of fertilizer that a lot of farmers aren't going to be able to afford to use, especially in countries within Africa where Most of the food is produced by local family farms. It's not produced by these massive corporations that have credit lines and they can just go in and buy up the fertilizer. A lot of countries are going to see their fertilizer use go down significantly. And with that, their crop yields will go down significantly. So this closure of Black Sea ports only exacerbates the problem and makes it far worse. Speaking of fertilizer production in Europe, we can go to this article from the Chemical Engineer. It's titled, BASF to downsize in Europe as Chemicals Trade Group warns the sector is at breaking point. BASF has said it must, quote, permanently cut costs at its European sites to protect the company from weakening chemical market conditions in the region. The blow follows warnings from the European Chemicals Trade Group, CEFIC, that the energy crisis has pushed the sector to the breaking point. While announcing BASF's third quarter results, CEO Martin Brudermüller said, first, the European chemical market has been growing only weakly for about a decade. Second, the significant increase in natural gas and power prices over the course of this year is putting pressure on chemical value chains. Brudermüller said that uncertainties around the regulations planned by the EU were also a cause of concern for the chemicals industry. These challenging framework conditions in Europe endanger the international competitiveness of European producers and force us to adapt our cost structures as quickly as possible and also permanently, he says. So, what are we seeing here? We are seeing the deindustrialization of Europe. And this is just the latest case with BASF. We talked about last week, there were 4 companies, all of them over 125 years old in Germany, that declared bankruptcy within 24 hours of each other. That should tell you the severity of this crisis when you think about all the earth-shaking events, 2 world wars, the rise of Nazi Germany, hyperinflation, the Great Depression, all these different events that were able to be navigated by these companies successfully. And, you know, old companies come to an end all the time, but within 24 hours, 4 of these companies that navigated all those challenges came to an end in a single day. And now we have BASF basically saying essentially that they're pulling out of Europe because of the high energy cost. They don't see that coming to an end anytime soon. So they're moving their industry abroad. We're going to see this on a mass scale until this crisis gets fixed. Europe is not going to be competitive. And so its economy is going to essentially collapse. What is that going to lead to? What sort of political change will that involve? Will this lead to the rise of the Antichrist? Will it cause a global financial crisis? I believe it will cause a global financial crisis as Europe goes into a deep depression as a result of these high energy prices, because it's affecting everyone. It's affecting governments, it's affecting corporations, companies, it's affecting households. No one can escape these high energy prices. And it's sending Europe back to the 19th century, at least 19th century standards of living, where people are going and they're getting firewood out of the forest, or they're eating food that doesn't have to be cooked in order to just get by. This can't go on. It's going to lead to massive political upheaval and social unrest. We're already starting to see that. And again, is this creating the atmosphere that will launch the career of the Antichrist? It may very well be, so we'll continue to watch this as well. And we have this tweet from Wall Street Silver, and I'll play this video here for you in a second. They say the 4th Industrial Revolution does not change what you are doing, it changes you. If you take genetic editing as an example, of course, this has a big impact on your identity. You are changing what it means to be human. And here they're quoting Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum in this interview. So I'll play this real quick and then we'll comment on it.
The difference of this 4th industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, right, just as an example.
So here he's saying, you know, previous industrial revolution, it may change the work you're doing. Instead of maybe being a craftsman who hand makes an item, you go and work in a factory. But this fourth industrial revolution that he envisions is going to change you genetically. It's going to alter you.
It's you who are changed, and of course this has a big impact on your identity.
Yeah. And offers certain kinds of possibilities that have to be careful about. You know, when you began to do that kind of gene editing, some people worry that you are changing what it means to be human.
To hold that thought, changes what it means to be human.
The problem, of course, the new industrial revolution offers us many opportunities, but it raises manifold questions on the ethical, but even legal implications, and we have to be prepared for it, and that's what we want to do in Davos next.
So it raises many ethical and legal questions, this editing and transforming of human beings around us, that people like Klaus, they're going to be in charge of doing that, right? No, he's not saying maybe we shouldn't do this, right? No, by no means is he saying that. He's saying we're preparing for it. We're putting our guidelines in place so that we can change you in this fourth industrial revolution. We're going to manipulate your genetic code. These people are nuts. They're power hungry. He is not alone. These are people that are transhumanist in nature. They believe that the next step in human evolution is to step up to this higher post-human ideal. Where have we heard all of this before? Right? Where have we heard about superhumans who are better than others, who are evolving to a higher plane and pushing this on other people and pushing this propaganda on other people? It wasn't that long ago that we had to fight a global war to stop this, and now we're dealing with it all over again. And again, this idea of changing what it means to be human. I want to take a look at this Bible verse. This is from Matthew 24, verse 22. It's Jesus speaking, and he says, "And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." So what does that verse ultimately mean? Well, one day the world will find out. I don't plan on being here when that happens. But I believe ultimately it means that these transhumanists who seek this post-human future, who believe that we can evolve by altering our genetic code and redesigning ourselves in a more intelligent way because they don't believe that God has done that already, that they're going to push this to the limits to where if Jesus doesn't return, there really won't be a humanity left. It will have transformed into some unrecognizable state. So we will see, but it's a sign of the times in which we live, guys. All of these stories show the times in which we live, and it may sound like bad news to some, but it is good news because Jesus and the prophets said when we see all of these signs converging together, we know that his return is right at the door, and that is good news, guys. It's good news because Jesus, while we were still sinners, died on the cross for you and me. He gave his blood as atonement for our sins so that we can have eternal life. That is the greatest news there ever was and ever will be. And so have hope. Jesus is coming. All this bad news, it won't last forever. It's just temporary. But we need to be aware of it, and we need to tell others about it so that they don't get lost in the things of this world and they can keep their eyes focused on the true hope, the foundation of which you should build your life, and that is Jesus Christ. So, guys, make sure to leave your comments below, like and share this. God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.